welcome to another episode of EPMS Tech Talk. I'm Joanne LaFlamme.
I'm Chris Costa.
Chris, what would you like to talk about today?
I thought we could discuss how to set your database up for multi-company or multi-plant use.
Okay, great. I actually have a PowerPoint that covers both, so let me open that up and we'll start there.
Sure.
All right, so I'm going to open up the PowerPoint. And this first slide we have talks about our licensing. With multi-plant and multi-company, whether you use multi-plant or multi-company, you do have to buy a special license. But it works for both, and you can set it up either way. So let's talk about the differences between the two.
Okay.
So once you purchase a multi-company and multi-plant license, you can either set up individual plants, and if you set up individual plants, you would do that if basically your company works as one entity, one financial entity, but you have different divisions or different plants that you want to be able to separate the transactions for. But in the end, you want to be able to roll it up financially to see the reports as one company, or even to see all estimates or all orders or all purchase orders for the entire company.
Sure.
The other option is if you want to use multi-company, where you're actually running two separate companies, two separate entities that you never want to roll together. You could do that with the same license. However, the companies both have to exist on the same SQL server on the same network. But you set them up as two separate databases. So you'll have an Enterprise 32 database, and then you'll have another database for the other company. And everything is kept completely separate. There's no interaction between the two.
Okay.
If you're actually going to run two separate companies, and those companies were going to have their own SQL servers, their own network, you'd actually have to purchase another copy of Enterprise. It's a separate purchase.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. So with multi-company, then someone just opens up Enterprise on the login screen. They choose what database to go into.
Exactly. So they'll have access to both, and they can go in one or the other.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So maybe if we look at multi-plant a little bit more, how would we set up the plants in Enterprise?
So let's take a look.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go over the slide here first, and then we'll take a look in Enterprise. There are some system settings. There are some plant setup settings where you can set up actually the individual plants. And then there's some settings that you just to turn on the multi-plant and to set a code that we use for the cost center numbering. We'll go over that in a few minutes. Then there are a bunch of settings in system settings for making plant ID mandatory on different transactions like estimates, orders, and POs. And there's also settings in the AR and the AP system settings for forcing a plant ID on customers and on all the transactions. Now we're going to cover how those work exactly a little bit later. In the plant setup, you'll actually set up plant IDs, and then you can, in each plant ID, just like it is in the company right now, you know how you can set up a logo for a company, you can set up a quote message. Well, you can do that in the plant setup as well. So let's take a quick look at Enterprise.
Okay.
Here, and we'll go into File Maintenance. And in the File menu, the first thing you have to do under System Settings is in the defaults here, you have to turn on Multi-Plant here. Once you do that, you will be able to go under Company Information and set up your individual plants. And in here, it looks just like the company setup, but now you're setting it up with a particular plant ID, and then you can give the plant name and address, you can do your separate quote message, you can do your separate logo. The other option you have in system settings is you can put in a number of digits to use for cost center numbering and plant routing. And 2 is typically what we suggest.
Right.
And what you'll do there is in every cost center process, you can use the last 2 digits, for example, to indicate the plant. So you have your regular numbering and maybe 01 for the first plant, 02 for the next plant, and if you have more than 2, you just keep going in that format.
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay.
What about users and employees if somebody's going to be working specifically in one plant or the other, or others that might work in both plants or be able to see both plants?
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
So let's go back to the PowerPoint. So for users, you could assign users to a default plant ID, and that's the recommended way to do it, so that way when they go into estimating or entry or any other module for that matter, it will automatically default them into that plant. Now you may have certain users that those users always work in that plant and only work in that plant. So by setting that default plant, they'll be in that plant and can't access anything else.
Right.
There is an option in User Manager, a checkbox option that says can view all plants, and if you check that off, then they can, once you check that off, in every module, pretty much, you'll have the ability to choose the plant that you want to be in. There'll be a new option in your menu that says plant.
Right.
You select plant and you can pick plant 1, plant 2, or whatever plant. And then they can switch between the plants and be able to see estimates, orders, purchase orders, whatever it might be for that plant. Or they could take the plant ID completely out if they want to see everything for all plants.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right.
Regarding employees, these would be your CSRs, estimators, purchasing agents, and data collection employees. You can assign a plant ID to the employees, and that would limit the list. So for example, for CSRs, if you assign a plant ID, then only plant, and anybody that's in plant 1 will only see CSRs assigned to plant 1. Estimators assigned to plant 1, purchase agents assigned to plant 1, when they go to assign those to estimates, orders, POs. For data collections, you can assign employees to a particular plant, and you can assign departments to a particular plant. So when you're in data collections, you'll only see departments and employees associated with those plants.
Great.
Okay?
Okay. What about configuring maybe customers and suppliers? Same thing, putting them into one plant or the other.
Okay, so let's talk about that. With customers and vendors or suppliers, you have the choice of either assigning to no plant, and this would be if they were shared. So if you have customers and vendors that all the plants share, you would assign them to no plant, they'll be available to both. You can assign them to a specific plant if they're not shared, and then they'll only be available to that plant. So basically, each plant will see customers and vendors in their specific plant, plus customers and vendors with no plant ID.
Okay.
Okay?
That all makes sense. Materials, similar?
They are similar. Let's take a look at that slide. With the materials, you can set a plant ID on a category and or an item, and then that category and or item would only be available to that plant. Now that works if you have categories and items that are very specific to the plant. So if they do different things and they deal with different materials, then that may be how you want to set it up. Or even if they use the same materials, you may want to set up different items for the different plants, because a lot of times what happens is they get different pricing from the vendors because of their volume.
Right.
So in that case, if the pricing is going to be different, then again, you probably would want to set up 2 different items and assign them to those plants.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Okay.
The other option is you can set the plant ID on a location code only. So then you'd use the same category and item for all the plants, and then the on-hand values would belong to a particular plant based on the location codes. So in that case, you could have a location code called plant 1 or a location code called plant 2, or just you may have just completely different warehouse locations and assign plant 1 to those locations and another set of locations assigned to plant 2, and then you'd be able to look at what you had on hand based on a plant.
Right.
But they'd be using the same material code.
Yep. And then I imagine if someone transfers material from one location to another, they just transfer, and the location code will dictate
Correct.
where it is. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Perfect. All right.
Okay.
What about cost centers and processes?
All right, let's take a look at that. With cost centers, they should be assigned to the plant where the particular equipment is located, and the plant ID is assigned at the cost center level. Processes don't have a plant ID, they just follow along with whatever the plant ID is on the cost center. Now, if you have users who can view all plants and they're doing estimates and orders, they will be able to create, say, an order or an estimate for plant 1, and they'll be able to pull in processes for plant 1 or plant 2 if they can view all plants. Because you might have a job that maybe, 80% of it is in plant 1, but there's a part of it that's going to go over to plant 2, and you'll be able to pull from those processes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. Can we take a look maybe at some of the transactions, how people would see different things if they're in one plant or no plant? Or...
Sure. So let's first go over the slide, and then we'll take it into Enterprise to take a look. So as far as estimating order entry is concerned, you can filter that list by plant, so you can see just estimates and orders for a particular plant. Or if you do have the can view all plants option, you can take the plant ID completely out and see everything. As we just talked about, you can include processes for multiple plants. You can also route jobs. So if you do have a job that maybe you planned for plant 1, if plant 2 has the same processes, so maybe you've got art and design in plant 1 and in plant 2. As long as you've numbered them the same, but then those last 2 digits would be different. They'd have
Right.
the O1 or the O2. That's how the plant routing works. If it finds a cost center that matches exactly in the other plant, except for those last 2 digits, it can route that part of the job to the other plant for you. And we can take a quick look at that.
Okay.
The other transaction would be purchase orders, where they can have a plant ID assigned. And as I said, there's several settings in system settings where you could force a plant ID. So if you've got a setting turned on that says you have to have a plant ID on an estimate or an order or a purchase order, it won't let you save those transactions without a plant ID.
Okay, perfect.
Okay? All right, let's take a quick look. I'm going to open up estimating order entry. And I'm logged in as a user that is assigned to plant 1. So you can see up here that I'm in plant 1. And I've pulled in plant ID in the data grid, so I'm only seeing orders that are assigned to plant 1. But because I can view all plants, I do get a plant menu where I can select a plant, and I can switch to plant 2. And now I'm in work in process, so I'm only seeing work in process jobs for plant 2. Or I can take out the plant ID completely, and now you can see I'm seeing both and seeing everything. The other thing I can do here is I can route a job. Let me sort this list to put the most recent jobs on top. And I'm going to grab this top job and I'm going to go into plant routing and quickly show you this. So I've got a job here that's got several cost centers in it, and up here, say I want to take the art and design and I want it to go, and maybe the proofing, and I want it to go into plant 2. So I select plant 2 and I hit the route button, and because it found a matching cost center, if there were more it would have done those as well, but because it found these 2 matched, it swapped them out. Now if I want to save it this way, I can hit the apply button, and it will actually save it back and recalculate the job based on those cost centers. And then from here, we give you a scheduling button as well if you want to be able to go into scheduling and then schedule that job. And it will schedule in the processes or cost centers from the different plants.
Okay, perfect.
One more thing I just want to point out is there is, as we know, the plant ID on the header level of the job. Well, you can either go in and edit the plant from here, or you can change the plant ID in here, which you would do if you wanted to actually move the whole job from one plant to another. Usually you'd set the plant ID up to be the job it's going to bill out of.
Right, okay.
Okay?
Okay. All that makes sense. I guess the last thing would be to take a look at some of the accounting concerns.
Okay.
Which if you want, we can switch. I can take
All
us
right,
through
so
that.
let me just close out of this for you, and then we'll open up our PowerPoint and we'll move on to the accounting.
Okay.
All right.
So obviously we talk about the 4 different modules here. There's some general ledger aspect where we can talk about setting up the GL accounts.
Okay.
Using maybe the prefix or what we call the department code to indicate which plant or company, if they were using multi-company, but staying with plant, what plant it was in. Then you can run the reports, by one plant or the other.
Okay.
So we'll look at that. There's also a multi-plant setup in the GL where if the control accounts are different for each plant, you can define those.
Okay.
And then in accounts receivable, like you just mentioned with estimates and orders, you can configure the transactions to be within one plant or another. It can be based on the user that's logged in.
Okay.
Some of the reports will print by plant. AP, pretty similar. Okay, you can have the transactions stored by plant. And then also run some of the reports. Cash book really is probably the one module that isn't really multi-plant. I think the intention there is whoever's doing the bank reconciliations more at a company-wide level,
Okay.
rather than an individual plant level.
Okay. Well, can we take a look at GL and just take a look at the structure of the
Sure.
GL code?
Absolutely. Okay. And we'll start in the GL. And so if we look first at the accounts, okay, so as you can see, these accounts are set up with just a straight main code. Okay, there's no differentiating prefix or suffix, but people that use the multi-plant functionality oftentimes will put the plant ID into the department code consistently throughout their GL accounts.
Okay.
And all accounts have to be set up the same way. So if you use a 2-digit department code and a 5-digit, in this case, main code, then they all have to be the same.
Okay.
So even if your, balance sheet accounts are considered corporate, but only the P&L you want to break down by plant, you'd still want to use like a 00 in all the balance sheet accounts, indicating maybe no plant specific.
Okay.
And then in the accounts that would be plant specific, you could put the 01, 02 in there, and then so for your sales, you might have 01-4000 and then 02-4000.
Okay.
And then you can run your reports, specifying one department or another.
Or both, if you
Or
want
both,
to see.
right.
There is a plant ID on the GL account. Is that used for
There
anything?
is, and that, we give people the ability, and actually you can see that here, actually. People may want to customize reports, so you could assign the account specific to a plant and,
Okay.
and do something that way too.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So if we just look briefly at the report options, so the balance sheet and the P&L specifically, you can filter by the department code, which is our prefix. So if you do stick the plant ID in there, you'll be able to right there say, okay, let me see the report with everything mapped to 01 or 02.
Or nothing.
Or if you leave it blank like it is here, it'll just print for everything.
Okay, great.
Right. Okay. And then, as mentioned, also in the GL, there is a plant setup screen here. So you've got the GL control accounts that you would link back in the main GL standards page, but you can do it here for each of the plants. So I can hover over plant 1 or plant 2 and then define these control accounts here. So if you are multi-plant all the way back to the balance sheet and you want to set a specific AP, AR,
Okay.
banks, things like that, you can assign those codes here.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right, and if we look at maybe AR next. So you mentioned, the transactions in order entry and purchasing, and it works very similar here in AR. Notice when we first open up, because we're signed in with a user that's at plant 1, so it tells you right at the top, we're logged into plant 1. So if I were to close out jobs, create invoices, it'll put those batches into plant 1 by default.
Okay.
If I'm a user that has the ability to switch between plants, I can click the plant menu and make the switch like you showed in order entry. Okay. It's got the same system setting option in here to make plant ID mandatory. All right, so people won't be able to save batches without assigning the plant.
Okay.
Okay. AP works very similar. The only difference with accounts payable is there isn't a plant menu at the top to put you specifically in one plant, although it does recognize if the user is physically assigned to one plant.
Okay.
So because we're logged into plant 1, if I were to go up to a batch and add a batch, it does have me under plant 1 by default.
But you could change it.
But I could change it.
Okay.
If I have the ability to switch, I'll be able to change that. Now if I was locked on, plant 1 at the user without the box, can view all plants, and that would be grayed out. And you wouldn't be able to make the switch.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And we didn't look at this in AR, but we can look at it here. Some of the reports, like your aging report, for example, it will come in with a plant designation there, so you can run it for the plant you want.
Okay.
AR, the aging report, the tax report. Okay, the key reports will let you print them by plant.
Okay, great.
Okay, and as mentioned, Cashbook really doesn't have the same multi-plant functionality, again, because whoever's doing the bank rec is considered more at the company level than an individual plant.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right. Okay, good. I think that was a good discussion.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of EPMS Tech Talk. I'm Joanne LaFlamme.
And I'm Chris Costa.
Please look forward for more to come.